I don't moonlight as a rapper. My jersey up too high in the rafters. I got a front team, new life and a tractor. Still sipping that moonshine and I'm plastered.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Moonlighters Club. I'm with Chris Davis. Do you prefer Christopher?
Oh, Chris. Christopher is way too many syllables. So,
Okay,
yeah.
Chris. All right.
Nah, keep it simple.
All right, we'll keep it simple. Chris and I met a while back at an event at Bow Market. It's a place in Somerville, Massachusetts. Really neat. Hub Week put it together.
Yep.
And Hub Week's a company that basically just like throws a bunch of cool festivals and meetups.
Yeah, it was
I feel like
great event. Basically, all different kinds of entrepreneurs, all walks of life, just kind of there in this bar. And it was a good venue, good beer. There was free beer, which is often the best kind. And plus,
yeah, that was free beer.
Yeah, no, I got to meet up with Joel here and, just talk about business and things like that. And we eventually linked up and yeah, here I am. So
Chris, when you first started talking to me, you went to MIT.
Yep.
And so as you started talking, my head almost exploded. Only because you ran into another person who went to MIT.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, all right, I don't know what's happening. Let me just back up and reassess. So I'll start here. Where'd you grow up originally? Where'd you grow up originally? Before you came to Boston, where were you at?
So this is a story in of itself. So originally I was born in Northern Virginia. The DMV area is what they call it. And I lived there. It was a great time. I did, first part of elementary school there, actually all of elementary school. And I was there up until I was like maybe 12. But my father joined the military shortly after 9/11. So at that point, we started moving around a lot because that's a lot of, what military brats do is move from point A to point B, following their dad's jobs. And so from there, I lived in Southern California in the Mojave Desert for like another 3 years after that. And then after that, I lived in Germany, spent the first, basically chunk of high school at an American school in Germany. And then again, moved down to South Carolina where I finished high school and then eventually went up to MIT. So it's not a linear story, but yeah, when people ask where I'm from, I generally just keep it simple. I say I'm from Northern Virginia because culturally American, from Virginia, I identify with that.
So what's MIT actually like? Like I've been there for school trips. I've never Boston's it's the city of schools, right? So you have this idea of Harvard, you have this idea of BU, whatever the school is, they have their own identity. MIT has the identity of just being ridiculously over the top genius.
Oh, I mean, so like anything else, right? When it comes to an institution and experience, right? Different strokes, different folks, right? It's going to depend mostly on who you're talking to. So I can only give you my opinion. I'm not speaking for everyone, but it was great. I really liked it there. I mean, one thing I found is sure, there's a certain baseline of, technical competence with people at MIT, right? But in general, I find that the biggest factor that when it comes to people that I've met there is they're very passionate about something, Some people want to be the best physicist ever. Other people want to, advance the state of the art when it comes to medicine. Other people want to do things like music, poetry, writing, things like that. We actually do have a lot of those guys, kicking around, which is really cool. But, the entire experience just in general, I went there from 2010 to 2014. And so I'm about 5 years out. I actually had my 5-year reunion a couple months ago. And I mean, you will learn a lot. And you're going to fail a lot, like anything else in life, right? And this isn't anything that's just like exclusive to MIT, right? I mean, you're on your own for the first time. For many people, this is the first time they've ever had this kind of freedom, right? And you're taking all these risks. You're learning a lot of stuff at once. A lot of things just kind of pounding you, right? And I like to think of it as a pressure cooker, if you take it for what it is and embrace the experience, you come out at the other end, way stronger than you started. That's given that, you adhere to, a good, healthy lifestyle, keep everything in perspective, keep all your successes and failures, keep your head on straight. I find that many people end up, way better off, but that's just in my opinion, right? So.
Is it, when it comes to socializing, is it any different from any other college campus? Did you find it fairly easy?
I mean, every college has a different kind of vibe that goes on, right? And, because MIT's student body is on the magnitude of, I think it's like, 1,000 at least, there is a 99% chance that there is some group or, some subset of people that you identify with really well that will be your friends in a way. So I was in a living group, a fraternity at MIT, and it was a bunch of men of color who were basically, really, really cool guys. Like, they were top-notch engineers, great computer scientists, we chill. We did a lot of same things together. They were really, really good guys. And so that was the group that I identified with through, most of my time at MIT. But again, depending on who you are, you'll be able to find who you like. Like a lot of my friends, they were into, combat sports, like, taekwondo, jujitsu, karate, things like that. There's a group for that. If you're into, watching, TV and Netflix and anime, oh, turns out, yeah, there's tons of people who are into that. It's MIT, right? So, but
Nice.
yeah, like, no, the socializing aspect, it's like anything else. It is what you make of it. I found it to be a lot of fun. And keep in mind too, like, you're not just limited to MIT, you're in Boston. Like you could literally go down the street and there's like 10 different colleges, right?
Yeah.
So chances are you're going to find someone else to, do whatever it is you want to do, whether it's, friends, romantically. No, you'll be able to find it if you look hard enough, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to just come and jump out at you. And that's part of, the challenging part about, just being on your own. Now you're making these decisions that have their own weight, their own consequences. And yeah, no, you just kind of have to, go out there, make mistakes. You're going to flounder for a little bit, but no one bats 1,000 in this life, right? So
what was your degree in?
So my degree was originally in chemical engineering. It was chemical and biological engineering. Basically, it's glorified plumbing. So what it is, chemical engineering originally started out as, basically a subset of, the mechanical engineering, but there was a very high, what do you call it? Emphasis on, thermodynamics, piping, plumbing, basically trying to get, large amounts of chemicals from point A to point B, do reactions and, transport them safely and get rid of the waste products. And that was a ton of fun. You start to find out that like, what you think you want to do at the start of college and then what you eventually end up doing, there's some intersection, but you're attracted to it for reasons that completely were not what you originally expecting. Like I liked chemistry, so therefore I chose chemical engineering. It turns out not that much chemistry involved, actually. It's a lot of thermo, a lot of thermo and plumbing, a lot of mechanics involved. And so, I eventually really liked chemical engineering, but it wasn't because of the chemistry part, which, looking back on, I'm just kind of like, whoa, like I could have been so many other things, but I'm happy I did what I did. Chemical engineering is a lot of fun. I don't use it so much on a daily basis, but the nice part about engineering is, the different subsets we might call, we're all studying the same system, right? Which is the natural world, phenomena that occurs in, real life. And we might call it slightly different things and we might, use slightly different terminology, but for the same part, if you're looking at a natural system, the same stuff's happening, you just call it slightly different things. So if you're good at thermo and like, chemical engineering, chances are for mechanical engineering, you go over very, very similar stuff. Now you're talking about, thermofluids and thermodynamics, and that's a little bit more of what I'm into nowadays is, mechanical stuff. So
That was the smartest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like I just wanted my head to not explode while I was listening to you break that down. But I like the emphasis though is the fact that it's learning something being applied, right, and then applying it when you get out of school. It's two different worlds, and regardless of what you go to school for. Like I could go to school for management, you know what I mean, or specifically management.
Yeah.
You can go to school for, but that doesn't mean anything. It's too broad. It could be you managing projects. Yeah. It could be you managing people. You could be in HR. So I think it's interesting. No matter what the trade is, you literally have to learn how you're going to apply this, and then what about the learning you like the most, as opposed to just the title.
And it's not uncommon. Like, there are many people who go into, engineering type fields and they end up doing, management consulting or, they end up going into finance or something like that. All these skills are very plastic, right? You can sort of, take them and manipulate them, do whatever you want with them at the end of the day, because really, it's neither here nor there whether, I care about, a pipe fitting or, this block of material that I'm shaving down, trying to make a specific part or, stock prices. It's all about the problem-solving process. And that's one of the most important things to take away from it. Like the terminology and the things that you learn, the specific things, chances are you're going to be able to look those up in a book at the end of the day, right? But it's being able to, ask the right kinds of questions to the right people and do it in a way that ultimately gets you at a final product. That's good, yeah. Right?
So when you get out of school and you, when you first started working, were you happy about the industry you were in, happy about the work you were doing when you first came out? Let's say like months in.
I was extremely happy about it. So originally after graduating, I went back to work for MIT. And what I was doing is I was working at a small lab at MIT. They do a lot of medical device manufacturing. So I was working on small implantable devices to basically figure out whether, a cancerous tumor that you have has a certain composition, what kind of drugs it's going to react to.
Yeah.
And I loved it just because for one, it was a very academically focused job. So like the dimensions of the job that you take, they vary a lot with the industry that you're in, right? It's like if you're in finance, you're expected to be at work at a certain time, leave at a certain time, or if you're in like chemical process industry, that's shift work. You better be at work at a certain time at another time. But for academically oriented stuff, I was working under a postdoc, someone who had a PhD and was basically looking to do more academia stuff, whether it be become a professor or an adjunct or something like that. And the hours were very lax, which was really cool for coming out of school. Like I was expected to be I was expecting be up at a certain time, leave at a certain time, but it's like, no, as long as you get your work done, you can go. And I'm a late owl, so like I'm okay with coming into work at noon and leaving at 8. But
nice.
Yeah, no, that's just about the hours. So it was a really cool atmosphere, and I was happy about the work I was doing. I mean, I was doing cancer research, which it's mission driven, right? You're helping a ton of people. It's a technically non-obvious. You learn a lot of stuff from people who are really, really good, and it's non-trivial. You're making things that go into people, and they have to interact in a very specific way, and you have to get data out, and then process it. And there's a lot of different pieces, a lot of different experts that you kind of have to call in to make sure that things are working correctly. And it was just the fact that wow, what I went to school to learn, how it's being applied in a way that is really doing a lot of good. I might not see the results of it until 10 years from now, but it's those gradual steps. Rome was not built in a day. And so I mean, after graduating, doing that, I mean, I loved it. In fact, for a while I thought that was going to be the industry that I was in, just because I fell in love with it so much. But after a while I was like, hey, originally I graduated in chemistry, chemical engineering. Chemistry and chemical engineering, not the same things. But after a while, I was doing a lot more stuff that was, mechanically oriented. Like, they actually had me fabricating and designing things. They taught me how to run a lathe and how to, use hand tools. And, I love that part of it so much because I never thought that I would like it. But it turns out I really liked working with my hands a lot. And, when you're doing that kind of work, it's a great synthesis of, not only, designing things, mental work, but also, actually employing that, putting that into practice. And that part I just fell in love with. So after I left that job about a year later, I actually went to work for a small design firm, which that was literally all they do. People would come to them with ideas for inventions or devices, large companies, small companies, whatever it is. And we would build them, we would prototype them. And part of what I was doing on the day-to-day basis was basically making the tools that the actual chemists would use in validating their products. So like, oh yeah, we need this jig to, go into this oven and withstand temperatures of, 800 degrees Fahrenheit. It probably needs to be made of something sturdy. So don't make it out of plastic. Like, oh, okay, cool. It's tough work, but you get to see, you get very instant feedback, when things work. Like, oh shoot, my part exploded. Chances are it's not going to work too well, right? And that was awesome. That was where I started to learn a lot more electronics, how to actually build things that work and function.
So how long were you there?
So I was there for another year after that.
Another year after that. So when did the wheel start turning as for you, for when you said, okay, maybe I can do something like this separate?
So I'm gonna have to take a step back because this is all happening in parallel. And so, while I was working my 9-to-5s there, and actually even for a little chunk of time while I was in school, it was me and another colleague of mine. He was a mechanical engineer, really brilliant guy. And we were in the last semester of our year at MIT. Of our time at MIT. So we were thinking about what we were going to do. And he asked me like, hey, Chris, what are you going to do? And at that point, I was just kind of mulling around the options. I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm studying chemical engineering. I'm probably going to either go into oil field stuff or completely take a left turn, work in like consumer products, like, work on 3D printing and plastics and things like that. And he told me, well, Chris, I also want to do things with 3D printing. And I had this idea for, a concept that I think we should build, but I'm not great at chemistry, but you are. So, or what you have to be. Like, I'm not great at anything. I just kind of know who to ask.
Yeah.
Why don't we just work on this product? So, while we were basically, finishing up at MIT, we were developing this 3D printing crayon for kids. And it was cool. So like, it would basically be this jar of material. I wish I brought it. that you'd pour out onto a desk and you'd be able to basically make these sculptures in real time. And it was just our foray into like, product design. It was my first time actually building something that would be used by, a kid, which is, it turns out they're very tough to design for. They love to break things.
Yeah.
And so one of our lab managers, he was very generous. He gave us like, oh, here's some lab space, in the basement of the chemical engineering building where I studied. Here's, where you want to go. If you want materials, don't blow anything up. You have free reign. Do what you have to do, and tell me what you made at the end. That was his biggest thing. Like, just tell us what you did. And so, yeah, we got to work, and that was probably some of the most fun times of my life. Like, I'd finish my courses in the afternoon, and then at night, I'd basically work and, help make this, chemical composition that was going to go into this product that we were making. And so, yeah, that went on for a couple of years, and it went on for a half a year after I graduated. We were really lucky with that hookup. And so we effectively got to the point where we had a finished prototype. We were testing it over at the MIT museum, and we were doing all kinds of cool stuff with it. And we eventually just, pitched it to a big toy company in the area. It's not too far from here. And they gave us money for the concept. And it wasn't a ton of money. It was on the magnitude of like, maybe, not enough to certainly, pay rents for like, months and months.
Yeah.
But it was on the magnitude like, mid thousands. But
yeah, it's an encouraging amount though, there may be something here, right? Yeah.
It's nutty to me, like, looking back on how much it was. I'm like, that's really not a lot of money, like, absolute terms. But, coming out of college where, you're used to eating Hot Pockets and ramen every night,
right?
It's like, oh my God, I've never seen this many zeros in my life, and it's ours. But we had jobs at that point. And so we were just like, hey, we don't want to be just a toy company, like we got to the part where all the fun stuff was pretty much over by that point, right? Like we did all the design sketches, we did the design for manufacturing, we knew how we were going to make it. Now at this point, it was, the more arduous things like, okay, marketing and, now we have to pitch to, different sellers, basically sell these products to people. And we said, hey, we don't want to be just a toy company. We came to that point in the road where we were like, okay, if we're going to get serious about this, we really, really need to like, buckle down because it's going to get tough ahead. There's going to be stuff we don't want to do, and it's going to be primarily what we don't want to do. And we said, oh, well, we have this money. We don't need it right now. And we were actually both doing a little bit of freelance engineering on the side regardless. And so we took that money. We didn't spend any of it on ourselves, but instead we just, bought hand tools and stuff. Like we bought like, a 3D printer. We bought basically, the things that you needed to, start a product design firm. And at this point, we're talking about maybe early 2016 is when this happened. So this is right when I was starting my other job over at the design firm in Cambridge. And so we said, oh, let's just buy all these tools and let's just, build things for other people. Because we came to the conclusion that while we were making this toy, we were not only lucky, but we were, quite frankly, blessed in that we had, if we ever had a question about not only, just technical stuff, but, business stuff, managerial things, who to talk to, even connections, they got us the connection with the toy company. If we had any questions about, anything, management related or, technical, we would be able to just shoot an email to, one of our professors or, one of our colleagues, and they'd be able to get us, very quickly a really good answer. And so when it comes to like, inventing things, we were really lucky. We had a super advantage over a lot of other people who wanted to do the same thing. And we found out that like, wow, not everyone has these massive resources behind them. And when it comes to, something that's not only, non-obvious, like, pushing a product out to market, but also technically tough, like, inventing things like, putting nuts and screws and bolts together, make a functional thing that won't just fall apart. There's a lot of not only a lack of information, but a lot of bad information out there.
Yeah.
And so there was a really big market opportunity for us to basically say, hey, you know what? We've done this before and we were fairly successful at it. We made an exit, if you can consider, making your money back.
It's an exit. Yeah.
A modest exit.
Yeah.
And, we were able to basically, help you with your problems and do the same thing because we love the process of just like, designing things, building things, bringing it to market, and, ultimately, making something that didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
And, man, so we said, okay, let's just do this for other people. Let's just start inventing things. And that's, what started a very long, non-linear process to basically, where I am today, in a nutshell.
So how'd you get your first couple of prospective clients that you were going to build prototypes for?
So our first couple of prospective clients, for a service industry like ours, that's always going to be the $1 million question, right? It's a very closed market where not only do you not know the people who have the problems that want to pay you, right?
Yeah.
But the people who have the problems don't know who you are. And, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. We originally just found people online, and you have all kinds of different platforms you can use, such as Upwork. We also started with something like Guru. And really, we had jobs at that point. So we weren't looking to make, a super killing. Our overhead was effectively, not zero, but very, very close to it. Right?
Yeah.
And so we were just like, oh, this will be something we do as a hobby for fun, And if you can get those first couple clients and do a really, really good job, that's excellent. That speaks volumes about not only your work, but also your perspective, your future as a business. Because we have a set of basically mentors over at MIT who are really, really good. They've been in the industry for tens of years. And one thing that they always tell us is, the best client is the one that you are. I mean, the best prospective customer is the one you already have. Right?
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of circular, right? Like, okay, how do you get those customers? Well, okay, you just have to kind of grind and, find those first couple guys on Upwork or, Craigslist or wherever it may be. But afterwards, a positive testimonial was worth its weight in gold, right?
Nice.
Like if you can have people that, can point to you and say, these guys are brilliant. They did an excellent job for me. And I would totally, not only get them for another project, but recommend them to my friends.
Yeah.
It turns out that, things like entrepreneurship, they don't often exist in a vacuum. People who want to build things often have friends who also want to build things, right? So,
I mean, even with all the technology that's out, social, with all the different ways of scaling, there's nothing really beats word of mouth. You could see things a million times, through whatever network you're at to. The second someone you trust says, no, that one's good, you're on it. So it's super crazy how that network effect really does kick in.
Oh, for sure. And just to bring the point home a little bit more, trust the process. It takes a very, very, it can be very slow and laborious. Like one of our mentors says that look, you're going to be basically grinding for clients for years until, you eventually have enough, inertia behind you where, you don't have to make any more cold calls, just, solicit people. And, it takes a long time, but you can't cheat the process really, because it's one of those things where I can just, go online and do X, Y, and Z, forever, find these super low hanging fruit clients. But the problem with that is, the lower the bar to entry is, the more competition.
Yes.
And, unless you're extremely stand out, which you can be, that's another way to, basically get on top. It's very tough to do when you're starting out though.
That's what people need to realize is that you can't, it's the work. I feel like all inventions we're trying to get past the work. You're trying to bypass the work. I started out with a fitness app and doing this on podcasts. I'm like, that's going to be, it's essential. I have to build an app, right? I'm going to do this and whatever. But no, there's work involved. I got to reach out. I go to events. I have to put on my own events. I have to have money for equipment and things of that nature. It's still a grind. You can't escape it.
And for sure, it's, it's arduous. When it comes to things like sales and you're going out talking to people, I mean, I don't hate it, but I'd much rather be in the shop building things. Right?
Doing your thing.
And, you can't cheat the process. I feel like, nowadays, there's a very, very strong push. And this is just my opinion. It could be 100% bunk. Take it for what it is, a grain of salt. But there is a very, very strong propensity to optimize for things. But you got to be really careful to not let that basically be laziness in disguise.
Yes.
There's no way to basically, get around the work of, finding clients, pitching it to people, getting in front of people and, very so often, getting rejected,
Right.
No one bats 1,000.
How hard is it to not be, there are times you have to be confrontational, but in a productive way with clients you work with. You're building prototypes. Did you find it hard? Or was it did you have to work into where you have to tell someone, look, man, what you want is insane, or what you're trying to do here is crazy? Was that a practice that you had to learn how to do? Did it come natural? Or explain that to me? Because I feel like if I were to do that and someone was, maybe because I find myself in the entrepreneurial space, myself, And it'd be super hard for me to look someone in the face and go, this is really stupid. Like, you shouldn't do this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so we've turned down our fair number of clients, right? Just because they've had us wanting to build things that either weren't physically possible, like, oh, I want you to build a time machine. Like, oh, okay. With 2019 technology, it's not really possible to build, for one. Or things that basically lie to people. Like, oh, okay, I want you to build this thing that does X, Y, and Z to water, and we can pitch it as this health product. Like, no, we want to build things that are physically possible, useful, and they have some kind of greater good, benefit society in some way. And that's one of the reasons why we actually got into, hardware, things that can physically be put together and built and things like that. Because it turns out, there's a lot of people who are really, really good at software, but a lot of the apps and stuff that are out there, they're lifestyle apps, like, oh, okay, I can, send tweets to people on my phone while texting yo or something like that. I'm super trivializing it, right? But we wanted to build things that, had real utility in the world. And we've straight up turned down people for that. But this question has multiple points, because there's also the clients that also have ideas for prototypes that, quite frankly, for an initial prototype have way too many features. Like, we're a really big fan of operating very lean, especially when it comes to hardware prototypes.
Yeah.
So the concept of the minimal viable product, right? Having the very, very minimal product with maybe one or two features that work really well that demonstrate the market viability. You can't do that if you have, something with bells and whistles and things like that, because it gets really tough to engineer and you introduce points of failure. And most damaging of all is you sort of obfuscate, right? You sort of obfuscate, the point that your product is trying to come across. If your widget has all the bells and whistles in the world, which of those bells and whistles is the crux of your product? It gets tougher with more features, right? And we find that a lot of what we end up doing is tempering expectations, right?
Yeah.
And so if someone wants a prototype of a widget built that has 5 features, we want to try to push that down to 1 or 2, right?
Yeah.
But 1 or 2 really good, refined features. We find that, a lot of the features that come across our desk, they're kind of half-baked. Like, oh, okay, like, I wanted to also have a GPS. Well, why? Like, it adds, so much to the cost. You're paying for it, for one. And 2, what does this have to do with the initial problem that your thing is trying to solve, right? If your hardware product, or, if any business idea or, software product, what have you, if it doesn't ultimately solve some kind of problem, you have a very big issue. And so
you're like a consultant too. I like the fact that you are consulting too, because there are so many people who will just take your money and go, all right, I'll build this thing with 8 features. It's going to cost you $300,000.
So,
but yeah, you'll get it.
So we didn't learn this immediately, because originally, one of our hardest things, it's very tough to say no to someone who's paying you, right?
Yeah.
Especially when they say, oh, we want more features and we'll pay you more money, like, who doesn't want more money? But it turns out, when things ultimately end up, breaking or failing, they come back to you and say, hey, what gives? This didn't work. Like, we should have done a better job of saying no. And that's one of the tougher parts of the business is, you're occasionally going to get clients, and it's going to happen more often when you're starting out because you don't know what you're looking for. For service businesses, you're occasionally going to get clients that will cost you money in the long run, right? So like, someone who, takes up a lot of your time, but the amount of money that they're paying you oftentimes does not scale with the efforts. And for that reason, there's certain ways you can get around it. Like, okay, if you bill on an hourly basis, okay, well, if you pour more time in, you're always going to be making X amount of money. But for some industries, right, where, you have a contract that's worth X amount, you have to be really, really sure that, like, oh, okay, you're only going to put in this much time. Because in this business, right, or in any business, any service business, one of the best ways to go broke is to do work for free, right?
Yeah.
And to do work for free consistently, And that's not to say that, you're never, ever going to, take an L on a client's or a project or things like that. Sometimes it's better to do the right thing and lose a little bit of money than, be greedy and try to basically, save that extra penny or two. Because again, it kind of goes back to, a service industry and a service business is all about the service, right?
Yeah. So what are some milestones that you have, or you have as a team, that you could see yourself pushing for? Or what's the next big milestone for you from a company standpoint, let's say in the next year or so?
So we have 3 primary ones. We talk about this, me and my business partner.
Nice.
We talk about this very often, and we revise it because it turns out, milestones, you're predicting for the future, but especially when it comes to me and just people in general, right? We're very poor at predicting the future. Things can happen that are completely unrelated to you that can change your milestones, and that's okay. That's life, right? But there's a couple things. So one is mission driven. We ultimately want to be the voice that people think of, right? In not only just the Boston area, but just generally when they have a hardware product or an invention that wants to be built. Okay, here, these guys are good. They know what to do. You're in good hands with them, right?
Yeah.
And, maybe even spinning off, certain, sub companies where, we specialize in certain kinds of products, and that's what we want to do on a mission perspective. But the best milestones are usually, metric driven, right? Like, okay, I want to be doing, X amount in Y fashion, right? And so the other one is revenue based. We want to, make a certain amount of money in the next 5 years, or a certain amount of revenue in the next 5 years. I'm sorry, not revenue, profits.
There you go.
That's the important one, because you can
you can make a lot of revenue and not take any money home.
Or you could make $1 million, right, and then spend $5 million, right?
Yeah.
There's some big companies that are great at that. They'll take other people's money and then, oh shoot, we'll make money back eventually, It doesn't really scale well for a lot of service businesses because, you need to keep the lights on in one way. And a lot of times they're not really, a lot of people won't invest in those because, okay, how do you scale it? You add more people, right? But the other way that we wanted to basically, grow the business is in the next 5 years, have a certain number of people working with us right now. Cool. So our team is relatively small. We have, 4 people, including me and an intern. So, we could fit inside this entire room and, we'd be out working, building things, design, things of that nature. One of our biggest things is, basically increase not only the depth of our team, right? So have multiple guys with, one service, one specialty working on a thing, but also the breadth of our team. So okay, hey, we want a guy who's really, really good at, just like industrial design, making the things that we look so ugly, for a first prototype. Yeah. We don't really have anyone that's really good at that right now. So just increase, the number of things that, we could potentially work on. But right now we have a fair amount of basically, how would you say, versatility in what we do. So we have mechanical guys. We also have people who are really good at, electrical things, and people who can make apps, CS and, computer science and things like that related guys. So, we have a fair amount of versatility, but we understand that it could be even more.
Exactly. So, and that'll just help you scale. Having those people who can do those minute things so that one person's not working too hard in the business, but on the business is the way to go. And
that's one of the toughest parts for me, quite frankly, because I love just getting in the shop and building things, but, handing things off to other people. And a lot of it's, granted, I'm willing to say it for me, a lot of it is ego driven. Like I know that okay, if I worked on this for X amount of time, then I know that it would be pretty good, but handing it off to someone else, that requires a certain level of trust, but also just a certain level of just hands off. But it's one of the worst behaviors that you can get into, especially, after you reach a certain scale, because, there's only one of you, and the amount of work that you could scale up to, is potentially unlimited. And that's a good thing for a service industry, right? Because if you're billing out, say, 100 hours, right? So if there's only one of you, you can only work 24 hours a day, right? Yeah. And so even if you were working every second of every day, there's only a certain amount of time that you can put into something. But if you have multiple people working on it, well, now it's potentially unlimited, right? It scales with the number of people. So that's one way to think of it. And two, it's just like, hey, part of growing a company from something that's really small to something that's larger implies that okay, you're going to have to, delegate other people to get X, Y, and Z done while you can work on the really important stuff, right?
Exactly. So, well, hopefully you get to hit those milestones. To everyone watching, where can we find you if you're looking to build a prototype? How do we get in contact with you?
Yes, so we have a website. We actually just revised it. It's www.gen1.tech. That's GENONE.TECH. And I have an email address. It's chris@gen1.tech. And we love having company. We love talking to people.
Nice.
If I'm not able to give you my advice, I'm certainly able to give you my opinion, right? So
nice. Well, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah.
Definitely if we get some time, check out that office.
Yeah.
To those out, if you need something built, this is the person who can build it for you. So, Chris, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Hope to run into you soon in the near future.
Oh, man, I'm not going anywhere. So.
And we thank everyone who joined us again for another episode of the Moonlighters Club, and we'll have more coming your way. Thank you.
Hey.